Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events Podcast. And this week's episode is our 200th episode of the Better Events Podcast. You heard that right. We're 5 seasons in, 200 episodes. And this week's episode, we have a little fun answering questions that we got from you guys, the listeners. You sent us questions via email, on Instagram. We dive into everything from how to make it from full-time to freelance, to what should you have in your portfolio, biggest obstacles we faced, cost-effective things that make big impacts at your events, and much, much more. So can't wait for you to enjoy it. And again, 200 episodes. Thanks so much for sticking with us so far. And without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We are so thrilled to be with you as always, and we are going to get in today's episode, our 200th episode. This is big. This is exciting. We have a lot to celebrate, so it's going to be a fun episode. And before we get into it, I am going to pass the time over to Logan.
200, a milestone. This feels fitting and yet at the same time I feel like a little bittersweet. You might not have heard my voice these last 2 weeks on the podcast, and that is because I want to take some time to acknowledge the passing of my mother-in-law, Jeannie Archie. She was battling breast cancer these last 10 months or so. Unfortunately, she passed about 2 weeks ago, or at this point, and my heart is racing as I'm talking about this. So I don't know how this is going to go, listeners, but I did want to take time to talk about that here on the podcast because, Mary, I had the realization that we would not have the podcast most likely without Jeannie. And that is one small piece of the impact that she had both on my life and the community here in Graham, Washington, and Pierce County and the broader. She worked at Boeing for a number of years, but she always was a connector. And she loved connecting people. And I'll never forget how proud she was to introduce me to the event planner that she knew from her time being on the board at the Point Defiant Zoo. And introduced me to Mary while Mary was working an event and I was attending as a guest of Jeannie. And then from there, it was her Democrat group that she was a part of that hired Mary and I during COVID to do a virtual fundraiser together. And that kickstarted a lot of what you listeners get to enjoy. And that just felt like something I wanted to save space for and talk about just a little bit. Again, I've been so grateful for you, Mary, for supporting me these last couple weeks. It's something that we knew was coming, but honestly, you always thought you'd have more time with someone. And I just feel very grateful for my support system that I have here. Some of the pros that reached out to me and sent me texts, and just folks who've kind of been a shoulder to lean on these last couple months, because it has been really tough to have things going so well in my business and have this in the background of just impacting me so personally. So yeah, I just we'll have a moment here with Jeannie Archie. She is the reason, one of the main reasons I feel like we got started with our relationship, Mary, and this podcast. And I know she also meant something to you and how you've grown your business.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you pointed this out. And I think I noticed it in our newsletter when you sent that out. And then you just brought it up here as well. But I mean, of course, we know this, but to have that moment and say, oh my gosh, this is literally why we know each other and why this podcast exists is pretty crazy to say. And yeah, I echo everything that Logan said. After I left this is my job at the zoo, I continued my relationship on with Jeannie and she became my mentor. And I can't exactly remember how that went down. If I asked her if it was a mutual thing, but we worked together on the events before I left. And so, as Logan said, that is how we met each other and how all this crazy stuff began. But I just remember so many things about really, really looking up to her and her career journey specifically, because it was at a really pivotal time when I was starting my business and trying to figure out what to do. And so just have like a woman in my life who had this career and how she progressed was really, really inspiring for me. And so I think that this is the perfect episode to be able to bring this up on, because it is our 200th episode, which is such a moment, of celebration and reflection. And that's what this is. And so we're going to dive into now that piece of the episode. But 200 episodes, that's over 6,000 minutes of content. Logan, we can talk a lot. That's great.
We really can. And that was just some rough math, listeners, like back in the napkin. It might be a little longer than that because, yes, we've had a couple episodes go longer than 30 minutes, but that's a lot of content and all for free in your ears wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're welcome. But also, we love it. Like I can't even imagine that it's been 200 when we talk to people and they're like, how do you have that much to talk about? And I'm like, we still haven't talked about so much. We've never had a caterer on the podcast. I mean, just like the basics of event podcasts. We still have so much that we could cover. But with this episode, we're doing kind of like a listener mailbag thing where we answer your questions that you have sent to us over time. We also did some prompts on like social media and other things. And so we are happy to dedicate this entire episode to your questions. So just know if you ask them, we try our best to answer them. Sometimes we hold on to them until moments like this. But we want to start off before we get into the questions by just calling out a listener. Well, it's a question and a comment, right, Logan? I think you dropped this one in here. They said, "Congrats on your 200. Love your pod. You ladies are impressive. Honestly, I'm blown away and wondering about work-life balance." So thank you. And then also perhaps getting into a question here. So Logan, do you want to kind of kick us off with this one?
Yeah, this person, we had two comments. The first one was from somebody just giving us congrats, which, yes, thank you. And then, yeah, wondering about work-life balance. And then your question got cut off, listener, where it said, seems like ... Did not get to the rest of it. But my take on work-life balance, and Mary will have to link to the episode where I feel like we dove into this a little bit more, but I feel like part of our hot takes that we've talked about in the past is like, I won't speak for you, Mary, but I don't feel like I totally believe in work-life balance. Like, what is balance? Just because I feel like we go through more a seasonality. At least that's the approach. I feel like I sought balance when I was first starting. And now I've just acknowledged I have different seasons of my life, and certain seasons where I'm more work focused or more life focused. Speaking about losing Jeannie, earlier at the end of last month, balance went very quickly into family and being there for my partner and pausing everything else I was doing. And that was something that I will say I felt really special, realizing all I had to do was send a handful of texts to key folks like Mary and a handful of clients that I owed work to that week, and just very succinctly explain to them what was going on and that I wouldn't be working that week. And everyone understood. Nobody gave me a hard time. Nobody made a big deal out of it. And I've learned from other folks who were impacted by Jeannie's passing that wasn't so simple for them, and they had more pushback with bosses and things. And I realized I've never felt so grateful to have a community that knows I prioritize work a lot, but in moments where I need to be there for my family or for friends, and they understand. And there was, that to me, I guess, is my definition of balance. But I will also acknowledge that my current season of life that I'm in is very work focused. I don't have kids. I don't even have any furry friends of cats or dogs. Like, I have been very invested in my career and working and traveling and doing all these things. And I know that that season won't last forever. Potentially it could change, or what's making me happy could change. And so I think I would just wondering if it's a general question about work-life balance, listener, like, you be open to whatever that means to you, and know that that could change from what you are doing 5 years ago. You could change your definition of what work-life balance is. Mary, how would you answer this question?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, we had a previous episode about it. I think we talked about it actually in a handful of episodes, but there was one through our Better Events community in December. We did a bonus podcast where we really dove into it. But like you said, Logan, I think this actually changes over time. So I'm like, how has this even changed since December? And people will ask me this question. Well, what I think this question is, which is like, you do the podcast, you have your events, you do this. How do you do all those things? And honestly, for me, my answer is I don't do any of those things alone. It's not just me doing any of them. Like, we do this podcast together. I have a team that does events with me. When we did the retreat, I did that with someone else, and that's part of how I like to do things. I don't love to do things by myself. And so that allows me to, ironically, like, take on more in a way, because everything is done in partnership. Now, there's pros and cons to that situation for sure, but that really does help me have more of that balance, is just by, trusting other people and splitting up responsibilities. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Yes. And if you want to listen to that full episode, you do need to be a member of our paid community over on Substack, but you can join now and go back and listen to past bonus episodes that we've dropped there, so you can hear our full discussion. And now a word from one of our partners, Event Badger.
Tired of boring event badges? Event Badger has you covered. We create custom, unique badges from wood, leather, metal, acrylic, and more. Imagine your attendees' faces lighting up when they receive a beautifully crafted badge they'll actually want to keep.
More than just an ID, it's a souvenir, a collectible, a lasting reminder of your amazing event. Plus, it's a walking billboard for your brand. Ditch the plastic pouch and choose Event Badger. Visit eventbadger.com today.
We used Event Badger for the Better Events Conference, our in-person day. We had wooden badges, and people loved them. They seriously raved about them.
And if you want to have your attendees raving, visit eventbadger.com and save 10% on your first order by mentioning the Better Events podcast. And now, back to the episode. Our next question we got from a listener is, what is the most cost-effective thing you can add to an event that makes a big impact?
Okay, I'm ready for this because I was just working on my team member Kim and I were just working on a design board for a potential event. Now we don't always do event design, and so my brain was really working in that creative space. And what I was thinking when I was doing that is, wow, lighting can make such an impact. And so that is what my answer is for this. Is I think it's lighting. No matter what type of event that you have, up lights I think are one of the cheapest things that you can have at your event to make a difference. Like we're going to have a booth we're exhibiting at an upcoming conference, and I'm trying to keep it real simple, but I'm going to have uplights that I'm renting. And so like I just don't know if I can stress that enough. And then from there are so many cool things that you can do, but I do think lighting makes a really big impact. Logan, what about you? Would you add any cost-effective thing?
I mean, my brain always goes on the production side of things. So I'm very tickled, Mary, that you pulled a production thing to say that's what made the biggest impact, because it is true. Anytime you can, evoke the senses, I feel like that is something that I would even level up from years of lighting. If you can get dynamic moving lighting for an event, they sometimes are called movers. To be able to do the infamous term, I got to talk about this last week on site with someone, ballyhoo, which I had to Google it, the technical term. It's like literally the figure 8 motion, but just think of ballyhoo means any kind of dynamic moving lights. Think starting lineups at a sporting event, or if you have a gala or an award show. The difference between we're in a ballroom with static lights and, oh, I'm at an award show often is, like you're talking about, Mary, up lights and scenic lighting of some form and moving lights. I feel like that is the lights would be a great way. And then if I had to say a different answer than you, I would also say doing an LED backdrop. And I've seen these, even LED signage is now something that a lot of people are putting in events. But LEDs, they're just great because you're not going to have any washout like with a projection screen. It's essentially like a super big TV. So you can put a moving backdrop, a static backdrop, you can change it. I think always when you see the big tech conferences and kind of the higher budget events, that's often what they're utilizing is LEDs and not a projection screen. So that's just an easy way to make a big impact. This is a good question though, Mary. I mean, now I'm like, what if we couldn't pick something in the ballroom or like the program room? What's another way?
Yeah, I was just thinking that
Effective.
too, but it reminds me of your like event pizza surprise and delight thing. Like catering is so expensive and there's so much that you could, you know, purchase when you're doing catering. But what if you like cut back, I don't know, on like one heavy appetizer and like one other type of something somewhere else, and then instead had like little slices of pizza that you brought out at the end of the night or something like that's like how are you going to surprise and delight? That's cost effective, I think, something like that.
Or like I'm like even thinking like a welcome drink when people come in, so they're
Yeah.
not waiting at the bar, and not just like a waiter with wine, but like an actual something that's tied to the mission or the theme or something that like instantly puts them wherever you want them. But yes, I also love a surprise and delight snack. So, or any kind of surprise and delight. I mean, I joked at weddings, they're doing t-shirt tosses. Some couples are. And like, why is that fun? Because it's just different. It's something, and that's like the goal is to have fun and be memorable. Well, there you go. You check that box.
One more idea real quick that just happened is we were supporting an event, and at the end of the night the client gave us some gift cards for like a local cafe to hand out to every attendee. And so as they left, we were just handing them these, and they were like, what, really, for us? Why? And I'm like, just for fun, like there's no reason, just thanks so much for coming. And they, that's an inexpensive thing. Like it does add up because you're getting one for every person, but it's cheaper than a lot of other things that you could get, like a per person cost. And so, yeah, people love those little gift cards on their way out.
I mean, that reminds me of your 11 Madison Park experience. You said they send you home with granola. That's also like trying to get people to remember. I mean, that cafe experience, if it reminds them the next day when they get their coffee, oh yeah, I was at this cool event last night. I think there's I feel like, Mary, we'll have to bookmark this question because I feel like I want to get
Yeah.
more of our community's answer to this, because I think there's so many fun ways to do it. And I like, listener, the way you worded this of cost effective, but big impact. But it always comes back to one of our top episodes of all time is episode 2, where Mary and I talk about having an event North Star and having a why and having that be your driver in decisions. And so I would encourage you, listener, if all of our answers are off the mark for what you're looking for, go back to your why and try to break down, okay, based on the why, whatever it is, if we're celebrating people, if we're trying to raise money for this cause, whatever it is, and then see what you could maybe throw a little extra money at and make an impact.
Look at us from episode 2 to 200. That's
Yeah,
great.
198 episodes ago. It's still relevant today, listeners. That's wild.
Our next question actually goes under a category of questions. We had a lot of people ask about transitioning from full-time events to freelance in one way or another. So we're going to start here and kind of see where we end up. But one listener asked, and they said that they are in a non-compete but want to be a freelancer. How do you make connections to launch? So Logan, I'm going to pass that to you first.
My bad habit is I love to try to convince everyone to be freelance. So I'm going to just caveat any answer you hear from me, listeners, is from that lens where I do think everyone should try it, and you don't have to like it and continue doing it, but there's a lot of benefits of freelancing. So the way I'm going to hear this question when they say I'm in a non-compete, that makes me think that they are working at a company that they are not allowed to compete for those existing clients. They're looking to go into freelance and they want to make connections to launch. So step one, the way I started doing my thing, I actually worked for my old company. So that is the first question is, does your company already currently work with freelancers? And do you think there's a world where you could resign from being full-time, but continue to work freelance with the existing company that you are working with? That non-compete, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it usually is often saying you can't compete with that existing company to bid. So say company A is your company's client, you can't then pitch company A on your own, but that doesn't mean you can't go after company B, C, D, all these other different companies. So that is a way that you can transition and know that your bills are paid, or some part of your bills are paid if you can be a freelancer. The way I'd always framed it was better for my company I was leaving and the clients that they were serving, because I didn't disrupt working with them. I still worked with them. I just wasn't full-time in the office anymore. But if that is something that is unattainable to you, I would encourage you. I mean, the mantra I have next to my desk in my office is there's always more events. Just because you can't work with those clients that you've been working with through your full-time job, there are more events out there. There are plenty of events out there. And I would encourage you then to start networking with other event freelancers to figure out who they're working with, especially if you're regional or want to stay in your area. What are the other big production company or event companies you could work with, and start to grow your network kind of outside of your existing. But I always would look inward first and see if that's an option, because that was a really easy way for me to transition out. Because I work for multiple agencies. I don't just work for one. And I'm not pitching my services to the clients that I work for through that agency. As far as they know, I work for agency A. That's who I work for. But I also work with different agencies on different projects, and I've never had an issue.
I agree with everything that you said. I was also thinking, this industry is very global. And so, yeah, if you can just look out from wherever that non-compete might be applicable and see what else is out there. And that's hard because it seems like way less familiar. But for example, Logan has her Event Pros book club group, and a lot of people in that are from all over. So you could get to know people there, or reaching out on LinkedIn, kind of like the things Logan was saying. There's also lots of other event industry communities and things like that where people are globally based. And so if you could try to look into some of those, and then like Logan said, just get your name out there, start to meet people, see who you know, then you're most likely for sure outside of that non-compete area. It might depend on the type of event you're doing, things like that, but hopefully that gives you a place to start. And my last piece of advice for this in general is just go ahead and don't be afraid to talk to people, because you never know where something is going to lead. I can't say it enough. There's so many meetings and conversations like networking where I did not want to go, but I told myself I'm going anyway. And I have had some really valuable connections that I still know now because of that. And they turned into some really great friendships as well. And so just do it. Just put yourself out there and see who you can meet.
Darker side of freelancing, and for the person who asked the question, just kind of straight up of transitioning from full-time events to freelance, is it can be a little feast or famine at times, meaning sometimes it can be very lucrative, lots of business. This is great. And you're getting all of that as the freelancer versus that money going into the company that you are working for. But then you also are in charge of making sure figuring out how much you need to pay yourself. Unlike working full time, you have negotiated a predetermined income no matter how many events you're working on. And so that's something just to think about, whether it's saving up some money so you have a cushion in case you have some slow months when you're first getting started. Or I always sing the praises of the Profit First book. I would read that. I've had to revise how I do my finances even after I had to read it a second time. But that has helped me be more consistent, essentially give myself a consistent income, even though at different months I'm going to be making more money. I know I have my busy months and I have my slower months, but that book has some good strategic things you can do personally with your accounts for how you can then pay yourself consistently to kind of mimic a full-time job. But I will say, like, looking back at my business when I first started, I'm making way more money now than I was when I first got started. And just understanding what your costs are, what are your minimums you need, and maybe even knowing you might have to take a pay cut while you figure out where your freelance market is.
Yeah, and we have a friend of the pod, Alicia, who like exclusively does like day of management, freelance type stuff. And something that I think is interesting that she does is she says she needs however many events a month. Alicia, I don't remember what it is. I think it might be like 11 events a month to meet your goals. And I think that's important because when you are transitioning from full-time to freelance, like you have all of that, all of it's now you're responsible for the money that you're making. It's not just a job that you just show up and get paid for necessarily. You have to get that business. And so I think taking that math, just figuring out how many events do you actually need to book will hopefully be motivation, and how many people you need to reach out to try to get to that point. So definitely be looking at that type of stuff. And then I also want to plug another book, which I've also talked about on the podcast, Buy Back Your Time. So we'll link both these books in the show notes. I think Buy Back Your Time is really great for someone when they are like starting their business and kind of have that North Star, or they know where they're trying to grow into. Then that would be a really great time to read that book before you think about at all investing in other people or bringing them onto your team. So it's like at that pivotal moment where you get started and then you kind of want to see where you should be spending your time. I would really recommend that book. I wish I had read it sooner for sure.
We love giving you some other resource recommendations. So hopefully that touched the surface. We have many episodes. If you just go back and search freelance, our website, bettereventspod.com, has a great directory where you can search key terms and it will come up with certain relevant podcast episodes. So if you feel like you want to hear more about what we've talked about, and don't worry, we'll keep talking about this topic in the future. All right, Mary, this next question, how to reach out to partner with sponsors for events like items in a goodie bag.
Yeah, sponsorship is hard. We need to talk about it more on the podcast eventually. One of those many things we can still discuss, but the biggest thing, and this is so simple, I know, but is just to ask. I cannot tell you how many people I talk to, companies that are like, I feel weird, I'm not going to ask. Just ask. The worst thing that's going to happen is they'll say no, and it's an opportunity to create like this really lovely partnership that will benefit your event, or hopefully just the relationship moving forward. So whether, I'm not sure if you are, a freelancer or a contractor, if you work internally for a company, but if you work internally for a company, this is especially crucial that you make that ask, because your company needs that relationship and that partnership. So for something like a goodie bag, one of the things that I've done is look at the companies that follow the company that you work for on social media, and then like DM them and ask them, say you have something coming up, do they want to donate something? That's actually been really successful because they already know who you are, or at least they did at one point because they're following you on social media. So that could be a good place to start. Logan, anything to add?
Yeah, I haven't had to do this recently. I feel like, I think more logistics on the back end, like how to reach out. So to your point, Mary, of how to find, and then I would just make sure you have a tracker somewhere, especially if it's more than one person doing the outreach. You just want to make sure you're not double asking anybody or assuming that somebody else has already reached out to a certain organization. There's also a lot of, like, again, my sports comes in, but pro teams or big brands in your city. I remember doing a fundraiser in Seattle that, like, they have forms. They have a way you can actually, you don't have to talk to someone. You're just filling out an inquiry to get free tickets or something. And they have a structured way because they probably get so many requests. I'm not saying you'll be successful necessarily, but often that is a way to, get more items or things. And like Mary said, I feel like that pro tip about people who follow you back is a really good way to get that outreach. And just make sure you're thinking about not just saying, hey, you'll get exposure, but getting specific with who your audience is. It's, 100 for us with the Better Events Conference. It's like, you're going to have 50 to 100 event professionals that they are the planners, the decision makers behind these events. And they are always looking to do something different and new. And that's something we talk to our sponsors about. And that is who is enticed and wants to buy. And so making sure you really know who your audience is for why these people would give you something.
Question. Thank you so much, listener, for asking this. We'll move on to our next question, which is good and broad, and we could go a million directions with this. But Logan, what should I have in my portfolio?
Oh, do we have portfolios? Sorry, listener, sassy answer. Yeah, I don't think I actually personally don't really have a portfolio, I guess, in the way that I'm hearing this question, but I do have a website. So I guess that's maybe what should I have in my portfolio or website? I will expand it to that. I would make sure that you are both listing what services you provide in addition to the people you've worked with. I think I see a lot of folks in the industry in different roles list out all the big companies they've worked with or events or brands. And while that's great to say, hey, I've worked with Amazon here in Seattle or something, that doesn't really tell me much about what you did or what you do or, what did you specifically do for Amazon? And so wherever you can kind of have some social proof, meaning like photos that you were there at or anecdotes or actual reviews from people you've worked with. I feel like those are all really important to have in your portfolio or your website. I treat my website and LinkedIn versus what my CV, my curriculum vitae, my resume that I send to people privately is I will list out specific things I've done, but I think I'm a little more general with some of my numbers on LinkedIn and my website. And then I actually really dive in, instead of saying, more than I worked with, managed a team of stage managers in my resume, I might actually say I managed a team of 6 stage managers and we managed, 20 basketball games or whatever it was. So I get really in the details for what I personally send people, but I'm still being specific about what that is on my website and my LinkedIn would be my best examples of portfolios. Mary, what would you have in your portfolio?
So I think a portfolio is really just to build credibility. And so what do you need in your portfolio to make you look credible? And I think that really differs on the kind of event things that you're doing. Because if you do design, then your portfolio is probably going to need to show a lot of this design, these decor elements or things like that. Or to Logan's point, just pictures. But us event professionals, we take pictures from events all the time, and who knows what our level of scope was for that event. And so yes, if you could get a picture of you at an event doing something, that is a lot of social proof that you were actually there at the event doing something. And so that type of stuff I think is really valuable. One of the things that I do is on LinkedIn, and I actually need to update this. I just wrote this on my to-do list. My personal LinkedIn profile, I write all of our past and current clients that I can disclose. And my whole point in doing that is just the credibility piece. And if they don't know who someone is, then they can see how many events at least I'm a part of. And yes, I think what Logan said is true as well, because it's well, what did you do for Amazon, or what did that actually look like? But any of this is to build credibility. So hopefully those are some stepping stones that you can take to build yours out.
And just because I do different kinds of events, I will say I have a resume, like a master resume kind of, and then I tweak it, meaning now Mary and I have done so many things in the industry. Sounds braggadocious a little bit, but it's too much to fit in one resume. And it's very confusing if you list all the things you've done. And so I will not have all of my accolades in there if they're not applicable to whatever project I'm going after, because that will help focus the person who's reviewing it versus them seeing, oh, she did corporate, then nonprofit, then sports. If I'm applying for a sports gig, my resume is going to be 95% sports stuff because I have enough things that I've done now that I can fill a page or 2 of accolades with that. So as you grow and evolve, and certain things I highlighted 8 years ago, I'm not highlighting now because it's changed with what I want to focus on. So just make sure you're constantly updating it and checking in on it at least once a year to see, and make sure it's still, to your point, Mary, about your LinkedIn profile, it's representing you and what you're currently interested in. This next question, Mary, is what's the biggest obstacle you had to overcome starting out in your events career? Coming in with the big questions.
This is a hard-hitting question from Caitlin. Caitlin, we see you, and I'm trying to figure out what to say. Okay, the question is the biggest obstacle. So I'm still going to say 2. I don't know if I can narrow it down. One is I had to overcome the fear and inability to lead meetings. Honestly, my first mentor, I guess it would have been after Jeannie, actually, like when I started my business, because Jeannie took me through. And then the next one that I had, she gave me a book. And I don't remember what it was called, but it was about leading meetings and how to get comfortable with doing that. And that I don't like that's where it all began. I knew that I had a problem because I would get into these situations and just feel so uncomfortable. And so I honestly think that that is a significant thing that you have to figure out. And the way I figured it out was by doing it. So that's what I would say. The second thing is time management. I've talked about this on here before. I have a time management problem. I know I do, and I'm trying to work on it. It's super hard, but I would say that it has been the biggest obstacle because I know that I get in my own way as far as what I can accomplish. And it's not just like how much can you do during the day, but it's how to use your time efficiently, how to not stress yourself out, why it's important to be on time so you don't stress yourself out, or like the times of day that you are more productive. Like that whole piece is something that has been really hard for me. Logan, what about you? What's your biggest obstacle when starting out in your events career?
Big one. I think I can also give two because I feel like I had two phases when I first started in events. My first phase was when I lived in China and I went out on my own. And I think biggest obstacle for me had been very much of trying to figure out what I wanted to even do. Like when I quit, I was just burnt out. Like I was just tired and figured give myself space to figure out what I wanted to do. And that I think that back and forth for myself was probably one of the bigger obstacles at the start because I just how I talked about what I wanted to do. I kind of was still on the fence of like, oh, I do marketing and I do events and I had some marketing clients that helped me pay the bills, but I thought I liked events. And, just trying to describe that to people, I think probably made it hard at the start for me to gain some traction. And then I slowly started to build credibility in Shanghai. And then I picked up and moved to Seattle. And that was a weird feeling where I'd done events for a couple of years on my own already. And then I was back in my home country where I speak English and knew me in Seattle. And so that was something that was different because when I went out on freelance the first time, I already knew people. I had friends. I had people in my community that knew me. And then I had more experience, but I didn't know anybody. Ironically, while I found a couple great allies here in the Seattle area, I felt very fortunate that the virtual world opened so much with COVID because then my reach expanded beyond Seattle and I had a lot more success with event companies that were based outside of my region. It's something I know has continued to today. You don't need the pandemic to have that be true. To our advice earlier for our freelancers was like, don't be afraid to reach out to people who don't live anywhere near you, but they have similar interests or similar things. Because that, to me, I think I did a lot of coffees and a lot of cocktails with people that didn't really lead to anything, which was kind of disappointing because that had been my tried and true strategy back in Shanghai, but I already had some social credibility there versus having to start over here. So yeah, that was a good question, listener. I feel like we could probably talk for hours about obstacles. Or the lessons that we talk about, Mary, we have to keep learning over and over again.
Yes, that was one of the things I was going to say is that I can't learn lessons, but it's fine. Yes, great question. Okay, our next question, Logan, is for you specifically. So our listener says, hey, Logan, as an upcoming events manager, what are the things I need to put in place?
Oh my gosh. Everything. No. All of the things. An upcoming events manager. I would just encourage you, again, kind of a through line with all these questions we're getting from folks. I'm going to say you're like up and coming, just make sure you're documenting things. Like make sure, I feel like my early parts of my career, got so into the doing that I forgot about not just, we talked about post-event reports and like writing down what you learned just in case you have that event come back again or a similar event. I lean on those documents that I made over the last like 5-6 years so much to go back and be like, oh yeah, I had a gala. Let me go back and look. And I wouldn't have remembered that had happened because we get rose-colored glasses the longer we're from events. But even to the portfolio piece, like making sure you're saving photos of yourself on site or screenshots of whatever brands you've worked with or things just to have for reference, because you never know when you're going to need that in the future, just for you. Because the whole thing we talk about here a lot on the podcast is you're the CEO of your own career, whether you work full-time or freelance or own your own business. Like you are the only person who's looking out for your career. You might have a great manager who invests in you and is also helping you think about those things. But I do wish I did a little bit better early on in my career documenting what I was doing and what I was learning along the way. Something that I continue to try to keep track of just to help out future me. So that's where my brain goes again. Listener, sorry if you were looking for more event execution, but Mary, what would you say to this listener?
Like you said, there's so many different directions that we could go here, but I would say to figure out, like, as an events manager, I think one of the biggest things that you're responsible for is the project management piece. Like, you're in charge of that, the prioritizations and making sure that things in the project are actually happening. It's that management piece. And so making sure that Logan was saying, you have all these systems and things in place so that you can do that well. So whatever that is that works for you. And that is what I would say that's the biggest difference that I see in this role specifically, is that you are responsible for that timeline and prioritization. So whatever you need to do to get your handle on that, it's a good place to start.
And I would then also make sure that you are not afraid to ask questions about anything maybe you don't know or don't understand. Rarely, and maybe that question's not right in front of 30 people on your project update call every week, but you can grab time with someone to maybe clarify what they were thinking about, or to pose a question to, if you have a manager or somebody, of getting clarification. Like in events, time is our superpower. Mary, you talk about, obstacles of doing time tracking, but I think you're hard on yourself. I think you're very good with time. I think maybe personally you feel like you leave yourself off, but you're a successful event manager, event director. Like, you have to be good at time, time management. It's just maybe better for others than it is for yourself. So the earlier you can get ahead of anything, you can solve almost any problem with time. And a lot of the mistakes I feel like I see people make in events there's a fear factor that they don't want to speak up and sound silly. And so they don't say anything. And then all of a sudden you have a much bigger issue that you're dealing with on site. And often in those postmortems, those post-event reports I talk about that are so important, you're going to sit there and be like, well, all we had to do was ask. Somebody had to have been like, hey, did anyone get that box? No? Oh, okay, let's check that. Versus being on site going, oh, no one double checked that box. So I've often found no one is usually offended, again, if you just continue to work on your approach of just double checking things or asking questions. We're down to our last listener question.
Let's do it. Let's see. Do you still enjoy what you do, and how do you keep things new and fresh?
We didn't come with the light questions for episode 200. No one wanted to know our favorite color or our favorite vacation destination. Yeah, this is coming from a listener, I'm sure, who's been around the block once or twice in the event industry. I will say objectively, yes, I do still enjoy what I do. I often like to think of what younger me and current me, if we sat down to have a coffee or a glass of wine together, what would we be surprised? And I do think younger me would be surprised that I'm still doing events, one, and two, that the kind of area of events that I've fallen into with them. And to your second part about how do you keep things, well, first, Mary, how about you first answer, and then we can both tackle the second part together. Do you still enjoy what you do?
Yes, I definitely do. I love events. We call ourselves event nerds, and it's the truth. I do. I love events for sure. Do I still like what I do? Yes, but what I do also, I feel like, changes every day of my life. So, yes, it depends the day.
And then the second part, how do you keep things new and fresh? I mean, this isn't a constant process, I feel like, because I have to grapple with myself. I love new things. And yet I will say my biggest stressors ahead of an event are when I'm working with a brand new client that I've never worked with on a brand new event that I've never worked. And I have I'm personally stressed out about it, just because I want to make sure that I meet their expectations and all these things. And my poor partner, Archie, has to deal with me getting so stressed. And he's gotten to this point now. He's like, you do this every time. It's something new. You're going to be fine. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. And then sure enough, I go and the event's great. And afterward, I'm like, wow, I learned so much from this new event because I proved to myself I could do it. So I feel like I'm constantly trying to take on some new projects, but I also need to sprinkle in and have the repeat things just for some of that consistency, because I would not be able to do brand new things every single time. I think that my stress levels would be too high. So I urge this listener to take on some new projects, maybe pick a number, 1 or 2 a year or more than that, of something new that kind of scares you a bit, because everybody always had to do something first at some point. No matter, picture an expert in your head, they had to have a first time they were doing something. Or to your point, Mary, of like leading a meeting. Everyone at one point had to lead their first meeting. And now they're really good at it because they've done it so many times, but everybody had a first.
I think what I do every day really is so different. And we work with so many different personalities too. It's like we finish a project like an event, and then we turn around and work with new people. And even if it's an event we've done before, they have new team members. Like there's always like a new component to each one. If you work internally for a company, I could see where perhaps it's a little bit harder to keep things new and fresh. But for me and the situation that I'm in, it is like kind of like Logan saying, I think it's always new and kind of always fresh. And so I appreciate the consistency when it actually occurs. But that is what I love about it. I love the change. I get bored super easily. And so for me, this is the right industry because of that.
I think my last piece, though, to encourage this listener, like you can also break up with clients. You're allowed to stop working with an event or a client because you don't want to. And that's all. Like I'm not saying break up with them right before their event, but annual or whatever, however frequent for me, it's annually. I take a look at my events that I've worked and I step back out of the planning process, look at the numbers, think also anecdotally about, did I like the people I worked with? Did I like the end client? Did I like the end product of the event, whatever it is? And that is something that I do evaluate my events and figure out which ones I liked and which ones I didn't and which ones I don't need to do. And that is, again, over time, you got to be at a certain level in terms of where you are comfort wise with your business to start saying no to things. But I continue to tell people there's always more events, there's always more clients, and a yes to some things, a no to something else. So if you don't do that event that you don't like anymore, you're giving yourself space to do something new and fresh or find that next dream client or that dream project. So you don't have to keep doing things that you don't like to do, even if you work full time. I know some folks who you just have to, again, get ahead of it, figure out strategically how you word it to make sure they work with a different team member or something like that, or pivot your role at the event. Always space for change. Woo, 200, Mary.
Woo, feels good.
Yeah, it does. I can't believe it. So listeners, thank you for your questions. We really appreciate it. And you can always send us, your questions via email or Instagram. We'll continue to do these compilation episodes every so often, but that brings us to the end of our episode. And Mary, you have our 200th bonus tip for our listeners.
Oh, no pressure. I should have thought about that more when I chose this bonus tip because it is a solid one for episode 200. Our bonus tip today is don't forget to bring your extra batteries in your event kit, which is true. I just needed batteries at an event that we were doing and somebody else had them because I didn't have any extras. And it was like amazing because they had exactly the amount that I needed. It was just perfect. But here's your reminder to put some batteries in your event kit.
We love an event kit. Yeah. Asking a planner to unbox their event kit with you. You'll learn a lot about them. Nice one, Mary. And that brings us to the end of the episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with us directly on LinkedIn as well. We love to hear from you. Just let us know in a little note that you heard about us from the podcast. And if you want even more Better Events content, as we've alluded to, join our private paid community on Substack. As always, we thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.